began donating blood when I was about 16. For some reason, there was a program at my school where they would take a little bus of us down to the Red Cross in Parramatta, and then we would get our fingers pricked to see that we had enough iron, and the whole lot of us would be in this quite nice building, actually, all hooked up to the machines donating blood. And it was quite a treat because it was just nice to be able to be generous in that way. And then afterwards, the Red Cross actually gave us some party food. We had party pies and party quiches and a chocolate milkshake. So it was kind of fun. And so I did that for many years. And then when I went to university, there was also the Red Cross would have a truck that they would park at the University of Sydney. And you didn't get as much food as a reward after that, but again, a big nice cookie after that. So and then when I moved to New Zealand, for some reason, I wasn't able to donate blood there, but I was quite happy that a few years ago I realized that I could donate here. And then I remember, I think the first time Venerable Kadra Rinchen and myself went down to Newport to donate blood. All was going very well, got back home, and then I started to feel a little bit funny. I think I'd eaten a bit too much. I tried to kind of preload a little bit before going down, knowing that I wouldn't be eating after lunch, as we are directed to do. And I drank a nice big bottle of electrolyte water after that. Eventually I went down to the bathroom, and then I started heaving. And I was vomiting into the toilet. My body was reacting a little bit to the lack of blood. And I remember, I think it was Venerable Losang, you must have cooked that day. I remember your beetroot soup that has kale in it coming right up. There was the red and the purple and then the green. I'm just like, wow, I didn't really chew my food very well that day. And if at that moment someone had come down to me with a hot steaming plate of fresh moles and said, would you like some? I would have looked at them like, are you insane? And this is the image that Geshe Tapke actually gave us last week in terms of how we should look at all the pleasures of samsara as if we were ill and vomiting and someone came with some nice, freshly prepared food and said, would you like some? It's like, no, look in the bowl, look at my face. No, that is not what I need right now. And I find this image very helpful to kind of jar me out of my complacency, because that's not how I look at things. And the profundity of seeing ourselves as a sick person, really, and to see that the sickness that I have is not cured by the pleasures of this life. That, that's not the medicine, that's not the cure. Because it really does appear to be that way. When I'm hungry, I want to eat. When I've been noticing that after sitting for 5 sessions a day, when I sit down in a seat where my back is supported, it's like, oh, that is so nice. So I have to hold myself up to let my body relax a little bit. And that's fine. That's well and good. I need to eat. I need to rest the body. But that's not it. That's not the final cure to the illness that I have in terms of afflictions and polluted karma. And what also struck me from last week's teachings was how Geshe-la said that the third scope is just an extension of the first two. And this tie back to this image around, how do I really relate to the sense pleasures in my revolving encyclic existence, is that bodhicitta, this great aspiration that we're trying to cultivate in this third scope, isn't something distinct or separate from the motivations we've generated in the first two scopes. I'm just extending my determination to be free from myself onto others, taking their suffering as my own, and then taking on the responsibility to free them from it, just like I'm trying to free myself from my own suffering. And so then it's been quite meaningful to, in generating my motivation in session, to really try and connect first with my own suffering, because I'm so not clear about the depth of it, that if I don't get more and more clear about the depth of that, how am I going to be motivated to free each and every single sentient being by myself alone? It's like, I'm just going to get distracted by whatever is on the buffet table because I'm hungry. It's like, no, I need to be so clear about the depth of my illness and what the solution to it is. Again, to use this imagery to shock myself out of complacency so that, I'm not stuck running either after or away from the appearances of just this life, which I see myself do every day. And so may we be as disinterested in the pleasures of samsara just as we would be as someone who's got their head in the toilet, heaving and throwing up. They wouldn't be interested in the food at that moment. But at the same time, later on, they're going to need to eat. They're actually probably going to be quite hungry because there's nothing in their stomach, and they're going to be thankfully nourished by what they eat. So it's not the object that's the problem, it's the mind that's relating to it. So just now, we're going to break our fast and very gratefully eat the meal that's being offered to us. But hopefully it's not with the motivation just to alleviate the hunger that we have right now. That might be a little bit stronger today than usual. But in this bigger picture of wanting to nourish this body so that we can use it to not only free ourselves, but to free each and every sentient being from their suffering.
This audio production was made.
Police repression pity.
This audio production was made in collaboration with Audible Anarchist.
Chapter 4. Versatile Strategies. 1,000 worlds struggling to be born. Ecosystems of revolt. The struggles and initiatives described in the last chapter constitute a revolutionary wave that can be found in nearly every country across the world. The examples I've provided are just a tiny sample of an extensive web of obstruction, sabotage, demolition, healing, cultivation, creation, learning, and communication that represents the best hope for our planet. It is the only force currently in existence that meets all the following criteria: a structural independence from the bodies responsible for ecocide and colonizing capitalism, a capacity to force the state to back down in key conflicts, access to the locally specific knowledge necessary for real and intelligent responses to the unfolding climate catastrophe, a tendency to break through barriers and create an increasingly global consciousness that centers an awareness of the intersection of all forms of oppression and all the unfolding crises, access to traditions of organization and eco-social relation that open the possibility for a world without capitalism, without ecocide. Please do not mistake my glowing review for optimism. This is still a battle that pits David against Goliath. And if we were to approach the ecological crisis as though it were a wager in a casino, as the economists do, for example, then our money would be more wisely placed backing the forces of the apocalypse. However, if we wager our lives, they're on the line already, whether we've realized it yet or not. This motley network of underdogs is our best hope. all the other proposals for responding to the ecological crisis are some variation of the strategy in which David becomes Goliath's shield bearer, with the hope that over time, Goliath will begin using his spear for good. What are the limitations of this revolutionary wave? The primary external limitation, as we have seen, is the counterinsurgency being waged against us, from moments of hard repression, all the people we have lost, all the people currently sitting in prison for their struggles, to the soft repression and invisibilization that mainstream environmental groups, media, and experts participate in, willingly or unwillingly. If at least some of those who are currently throwing their energies into redeeming Goliath were to shift their resources to supporting this revolutionary wave, which would also mean losing their considerable institutional privileges, then our chances would be considerably improved. There is a lack of revolutionary imaginary and a lack of consciousness that these different movements constitute seeds for future worlds. Basically, this means withdrawing our remaining faith in the dominant institutions and believing more in ourselves and the future we are trying to move toward. This is a limitation that is already being overcome within and between these movements themselves. And this book represents one small effort in that direction. It is, in other words, neither fatal nor insurmountable. There is a go-to mischaracterization that is used to dismiss the revolutionary potential of this wave, and it is very much an expression of the dominant institution's need to monopolize society-wide organization and problem solving. It is the aspersion that these movements have no solution to offer that would be feasible on a relevant scale. To name one iteration, Holly Jean Buck characterizes the phenomenon Naomi Klein names as blockadia as, quote, reactive, end quote. I won't go into whether this dismissal is the result of a misreading by Buck or of the limited view Klein utilizes to present blockadia as more palatable, begging the question, palatable to whom? I will offer the observation, though, that experts are trained to silence their subject of study. So it does seem both systematic and symptomatic that in looking at such a rich phenomenon, ranging from the resistance at Standing Rock to Hambach Forest, one would see something reactive. In any case, the broader, more global, less respectful view of the resistance that I have tried to present makes it clear that we are dealing with something intelligent, creative, strategic, proactive, and with a whole hell of a lot of proposals that will not be silenced. The movements and projects that form this global web are marked by their heterogeneity, heterodoxy, and plain ornery refusal to be easily categorized.
We do the practices with this aspiration to be of benefit to beings, not to harm them, to benefit them, and in our understanding, the best benefit is to actually, for beings to be liberated from cyclic existence, and we aim to become Buddhas in order to help beings to be free in this way. So generate those thoughts in your own way. So Venerable Chodron has laid out this sadhana for us, helping us to generate these various mind states. And she starts by having us think about all of our potential, all the kind of positive qualities that we can develop. Infinite love, compassion, wisdom, skillful means. So imagine what it would feel like to be those qualities. Just let yourself be love, be wisdom. Try to feel the expansiveness and peace in your heart. The wisdom that it takes to have this kind heart. To be unencumbered in any way. Vast and expansive. Take in everything that's happening in this world, reaching out to every being, human and otherwise, to benefit each one. So now imagine that these qualities of love, compassion, wisdom, skillful means appear in front of you in the form of Shakyamuni Buddha. So imagine this Buddha in front of you, in the space in front of you made of radiant, transparent light. He's sitting on a throne, above which is an open lotus flower and cushions of the sun and moon discs. This entire visualization is made of radiant, transparent light. But you're imagining a living being with a light body. So you feel yourself in the presence of the Buddha. The Buddha's body is golden in color. He wears the robes of a monastic. His right hand, with the palm down, rests on his right knee in the earth-touching mudra. And his left hand is in his lap holding a bowl of nectar. And this nectar is the medicine to cure our afflictions and all of our hindrances. And the Buddha's face is very beautiful. You can look at the Buddha's eyes. He's smiling, his eyes are smiling. He's looking at you with total acceptance. And as he looks at you, he's also encompassing all sentient beings. The Buddha's eyes are very peaceful, long and narrow. His lips are red and his earlobes are long. Imagine rays of light radiating from every pore of the Buddha's body. This golden light going out to all the parts of the universe, touching beings, carrying miniature Buddhas to help beings. And as they complete their work, they dissolve back into the Buddha. The Buddha is surrounded by the entire lineage of spiritual teachers, all the meditational deities, innumerable other Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Arhats, Dakas, Dakinis, Dharma protectors. And at the side, near each spiritual mentor, is an elegant table, and on it are Dharma books. The sounds of the Dharma fill the air. And they're also happy that we're here doing this together. Imagine their minds just blissful and peaceful, gazing at all sentient beings. So you imagine that actually you were surrounded by all sentient beings in human form. Your mother of this life was on your left. Your father of this life was on your right. Any people you have difficulty with, you imagine in front of you, facing the Buddha, keeping them there for protection. Family and friends are nearby. Countless strangers fill the space around you. And all of us are looking to the Buddha for guidance. So first we need to cultivate a sense of refuge. So we think of all the dangers of cyclic existence. Just think about how things are not secure. We run into dissatisfaction often, dukkha often. And people, all the beings around us, all the sentient beings around us, are also in the same boat, floundering in cyclic existence. And many of them have not met any kind of teachings that will help them out of this quagmire. So we generate compassion. And now think of the wonderful qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and generate this sense of confidence in them, in their ability to guide you out of all of these recurring problems. To take refuge, we need the causes, this kind of concern, this kind of alarm, fear type, and also this confidence and faith, and the compassion. So it is possible, on the basis of your present life and mind, to free yourself from all of these undesirable experiences. So resolve to explore that possibility to the fullest. Feel great trust and confidence in the three jewels, and open your heart to rely upon them to guide you and others from all of these difficulties of cyclic existence, and bring us to the peace of liberation and full awakening. So as we do these refuge verses, starting here, now we're on the top of page 21, we'll be taking refuge in the Buddha, and we imagine actually leading all of the sentient beings around us and going for refuge. And we visualize white, radiant light flowing from all of the Buddhas, the spiritual mentors, the Bodhisattvas, all of these holy beings flowing into us and all the beings around us. And this light completely purifies all of our destructive karmic imprints and afflictions. And it also brings all the realizations of the path. So put your hands in prayer position. Namo Guru Vya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sangaya. Namo Guru Vya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dharmaya. Namo Sangaya. Namo Guru Namo Dharmaya. Nama Sangaya. Namo Guruvya. Namo Buddhaya. 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 Namo Dharmaya. Nama Sangaya. So feel that you've come under the protection of the three jewels. And now we turn our thoughts to others and think about how much we depend on other beings for everything that we have, everything we know, everything we use, everything we enjoy. Our food, clothing, resources of every kind. These come due to the efforts of others. Our knowledge, talents, good qualities, these too are developed due to the kindness of others. And our ability to practice the Dharma certainly depends on others who brought the teachings to us over the millennia by generating realizations in their mind and teaching. So this is a very great kindness, all of these things we want to bring to mind. Our innermost wish is to be free from suffering. And this is the case for everyone else as well. We want to be happy, and all beings want to be happy. And like us, they encounter many difficulties, problems, sufferings. And usually, actually, their difficulties are more so than our own. Not always, but often. And when we examine our capacity to help beings, we find that we're actually quite limited. And we know from our practice that if we can reduce our anger, our attachment, our ignorance, our various faults, and if we can increase all of our good qualities, we're really going to be in a position to benefit beings. Imagine if we had just this generous heart that gives so easily, takes delight in giving, the kind of ethics that doesn't harm, has that just ingrained. Fortitude, loving kindness, compassion, wisdom. We'll be in excellent position to help beings by having our good qualities developed. And if we develop them fully, like a Buddha does, then we'll be able to be of the greatest benefit to beings. So we generate this altruistic intention in order to be able to benefit beings most effectively. So as we take refuge and generate bodhicitta, imagine that light is flowing into you from all of these Buddhas and holy beings, and it's flowing into you and all the sentient beings around you. So we're on the top of page 22. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So imagine the Buddha is so pleased with your altruistic intention. And a replica emerges from the Buddha, comes to the crown of your head, melts into golden light, and flows into you. Feel that you and the Buddha have become inseparable. Feel very close to the Buddha and allow your mind to be transformed and inspired. Let go of all conceptions you have about yourself. Let go of any self-denigrating thoughts. Let go of the concept of inherent existence and meditate on emptiness. As your heart appears a small Buddha made of light. He radiates the light of wisdom and compassion in all directions throughout the entire universe. And this light transforms all sentient beings into Buddhas and all environments into Pure Lands, which are places where all the circumstances are conducive to practicing the Dharma and generating realizations. So imagine this. You've transformed all sentient beings into Buddhas and all environments into Pure Lands in your imagination. But why hasn't this become a reality? We sentient beings have bias, prejudice, we lack love, compassion, and joy. So now we want to wish ourselves and others to have all of these qualities. So we contemplate the four immeasurables. We do this to reinforce our own felt experience of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity for everyone. Friends, strangers, enemies, relatives, people you don't like, people you don't trust, anyone, everyone. So as we say these four immeasurables, you want to listen to yourself say the words and contemplate as you recite. We'll pause between each of the four. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. So, in order to achieve what we've just been aspiring towards, we need to purify our negativities, and we need a lot of merit. We need to abandon things and adopt things. So when we do the 7-limb prayer, this encompasses all this abandoning and adopting of things. So we'll pause after each line. And you want to have your hands in the prayer position for this. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. So imagine yourself and all the beings, the sentient beings around you, making prostrations to all the holy beings in front of you in the field of merit, repeatedly prostrating. And present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. So imagine offering everything beautiful to the Buddha and all the holy beings. You can fill the sky with offerings. Make it very lovely and beautiful. You can think of flowers and fields and just everything that you love. Offer it to all the holy beings. You can do this repeatedly. I confess all my destructive actions accumulated since beginning this time. So now we do like a glance meditation of the 4 opponent powers. So for this, bring to mind something that you wish to purify, some fault or mistake. Bring it clearly to mind and generate regret for that. And then the other Purna powers are taking refuge and generating bodhicitta, which we're doing in the practice. The practice itself will be the remedial action, but make a determination not to do this action again. And rejoice in the virtues of all holy and ordinary beings. So think of common sentient beings like ourselves, the holy beings, and delight and rejoice in all of the virtue created by any kind of being. Let go of any jealousy, envy, and just rejoice in the goodness in the world. Use your own life experience. Think of things, people that you want to rejoice. And then the next verse. Please remain until cyclic existence ends. So now we offer a double dorje. This symbolizes long life. We offer this to the holy beings. We do this requesting them to live long, to always be a part of our life. And you can do this multiple times in your imagination. And then the next verse. And turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. So again, make this offering. You're offering with both hands this beautiful 1,000-spoke Dharma wheel, golden in color. Offering this to the teachers and the Buddhas to guide you and to continue to teach the Dharma. And then the seventh limb. I dedicate all the virtues of myself and others to the Great Awakening. So now we steer these limbs toward full awakening for ourselves and all beings. And now we'll offer the mandala. Here we imagine everything beautiful in the universe, offering it to all the holy beings with the wish that they will continue to teach and guide us and that we can generate realizations in our mind. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, for land, sun, and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. The objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers, my body, wealth, and enjoyments, I offer these without any sense of loss. Please accept them with pleasure and inspire me and others to be free from the three poisonous attitudes. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami. So imagine all the holy beings are just delighted and they receive your offerings. And the offerings melt into light and dissolve into them. And these all absorb into the Buddha's heart. And then immediately he radiates light back to you, filling your body and mind. And this light inspires you to accomplish the path to full awakening. So in order to progress along the path, we need to develop realizations. And in order to do this, we need the inspiration of the lineage of spiritual mentors, especially your principal teacher or your root guru, who is the one who has touched your heart deeply. If you don't have a specific teacher, just think about Shakyamuni Buddha, or maybe you have a connection in your mind with his holiness. And we make this request on page 25. Glorious and precious root guru, sit upon the lotus and moon seat on my crown, guiding me with your great kindness. Bestow upon me the attainments of your body, speech, and mind. And so then, at this point, you imagine that a replica of your teacher in the aspect of the Buddha emerges from the Buddha in front of you. And it comes to sit on a lotus and moon disk on the crown of your head, facing the same direction as you. So then this Buddha on the crown of your head is going to act as an advocate for you to request inspiration from the entire field of merit as we continue the request. And we're doing the long one on page 26. Buddha, unequal teacher and guide, venerable protector Maitreya, successor, superior Sangha prophesied by Buddha, to you three Buddhas and Bodhisattvas I make request. Buddha, head of the Shakya clan, the foremost guide, peerless in expounding emptiness, Manjushri, embodiment of the Buddha's complete wisdom, exalted Nagarjuna, best of the superiors who sees the profound meaning. To you three crowning jewels of clear exposition I make request. Atisha, upholder of this great vehicle, who sees the profundity of dependent arising, Drome Rinpoche, elucidator of this good path, to these two ornaments of the world I make request. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of oblivious compassion, Manjushri, masteress, flawless wisdom, Tsongkhapa, crown jewel of the snowy land sages, Losangdrapa, I make request at your feet. Holder of the white lotus, embodiment of all the conqueror's compassion, guide benefiting migrating beings in the land of snow mountains and beyond. Sole deity and refuge, Tenzin Gyatso, at your feet I make request. The eyes through whom the vast scriptures are seen, supreme doors for the fortunate who would cross over to spiritual freedom, illuminators whose wise means vibrate with compassion. To the entire line of spiritual mentors I make request. So you imagine all of the figures in the field of merit melting into light and dissolving into you. Into the central figure of the Buddha in front of you. All the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the Arhats, Dakas, Dakinis, Dharma protectors, all of these beings melt into light and dissolve into the central figure of Shakyamuni Buddha. And now Shakyamuni Buddha embodies the three jewels. And this Buddha absorbs into the Buddha on the crown of your head. And then as we recite the Buddha's mantra, try to let your mind be very open and receptive. Imagine this white light flowing into you from the Buddha on the crown of your head. It purifies all your negativities, all your obscurations, and it generates within you the realizations of the stages of the path. So we'll recite the Buddha's mantra together. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Soha. 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 Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Mune Suha. 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 Now, re-establish the visualization of Shakyamuni Buddha above the crown of your head, made of golden, transparent, radiant light, a living being. And this Buddha melts into light and dissolves into you. Your body, speech, and mind become inseparable from those of the Buddha. And then we'll make the dedication prayers, starting on the page that we're on in the sadhana, which is 27. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In retreat, sometimes you can do the breaths just as few as 10. Nichols told me, and when we're in a retreat where we're doing 5 or 6 sessions a day, it's quite easy. The mind is very calm because you're not talking. That not.
A whole hell of a lot of proposals that will not be silenced. The movements and projects that form this global web are marked by their heterogeneity, heterodoxy, and plain ornery refusal to be easily categorized. I do not think this many-headed hydra of resistance should be named. After all, a being with 1,000 heads would come up with 1,000 different names for itself. However, I do want to name common characteristics in the most flexible way possible, to encourage what I see as strengths and to aid more people in transforming their own activities so as to be able to connect rhizomatically with this greater whole. The following characteristics are not bounded containers that can govern inclusion or exclusion in a delimited phenomenon. Rather, they are tensions that vibrate throughout the entire web. Territoriality. A relationship with the specific local territory constitutes a main source of power for these struggles and projects. We develop our practices and histories in dialogue with the territory such that the, quote, environment, close quote, is neither inert surroundings nor a neutral field on which to impose an ideology that is the same from place to place. Rooting struggles in a specific territory walks a line between 2 forms of isolation. In nearly every struggle, there will be people who limit themselves to their territory, who do not look for common ground with other struggles or seek inspiration from their own experiences that could have a wider, perhaps global significance. And on the other hand, there are those who are alienated from any territory, even as they participate in, quote, local activism, end quote. They draw ideological lines for solidarity. Either they restrict solidarity to their own small sect, or they read the values of their sect into all of those with whom they would like to solidarize. Such people are a part of the mix. And this is a complication in territorial struggles, but also a form of openness, presenting the possibility to weave in a wider body of people. Ecocentrism. While many of those who constitute this revolutionary wave prioritize human needs, we tend to reject the pretension that human needs can sustainably contradict, outrank, or detach themselves from ecological needs. And at one level or another, we challenge or reject definitions of humanity stemming from the European Enlightenment and human/nature dichotomies. Survival. We articulate our activity in relation to situations that directly affect us, and we center this struggle as a question of survival, our own and that of other people and forms of life we care about. Having a voice, therefore, does not come down to expertise or institutional legitimacy, but to being affected and personally engaging with the problem and its solutions. Lawlessness. To a greater or lesser degree, these projects enter into conflict with established legal regimes. They may actively seek the subversion and destruction of existing governments. They may claim traditional and indigenous systems of law that paradigmatically have nothing in common with punitive or property-based law originating in states. Or they may seek as much as possible to pass unnoticed or mold themselves to existing legal regimes, but they will always value the needs of their community and the needs of the earth more than the authority of the government or the ostensible sanctity of its law.
Sandarshita Swarma Sukhavapade Nirshese Jamilikai Mane Samsara Hala Hala Mahashantiye Abahu Purushakaram Shankasakra Siddharinam Sahasra Shirasam Shwaitam Pranamami Patanjalim Om.
Communal being. Individualized or atomized views of human beings are eroded in favor of practices that emphasize and revitalize relationships between people, sometimes including relationships that break down the division between humans and other forms of life. There is always an element of struggle against the alienations imposed by states and capitalism, and a tendency to practice mutual aid and solidarity. This means that this web of resistance is fundamentally creative, of different social relations, different subjectivities, and emancipatory infrastructures, practices, and cultures. Heterogeneity. As mentioned, this, quote, movement of movements, end quote, to use the Zapatistas' terms, is extremely heterogeneous. This does not mean simply diverse, but that it is constantly producing differences and that it will not submit to ideological or cultural unity. This salient feature makes any technocratic proposal for solving the crisis extremely ignorant, which is probably why the technocrats tend to ignore or selectively silence movements that already exist when designing solutions. It should be noted that this heterogeneity is not just a cultural preference of the network, it is an inalienable feature of the network's territorialized nature. This is why ideologies or named traditions of struggle that are structurally capable of assuming diversity rather than unity of practice, such as Zapatismo or anarchism, would never be able to absorb all the iterations of this revolutionary wave. The only reason these traditions of struggle are tolerated and encouraged throughout much of the network is precisely because they have no ideological need to convert others to their way of thinking or to achieve theoretical unity. Intersectionality. The movements that participate in this wave tend to break down single-issue containers and instead recognize the interconnectedness of different forms of oppression and therefore solidarity. This intersectionality allows us to recognize one another even though we come from very different places and lack uniform identifiers. The process of recognition, it should be noted, is conflictual rather than pacifying. People often fight to get recognized on their own terms, a struggle that is not made easier by the ways in which we have been differently socialized within oppressive systems. Meaning, the self-definition of struggles is crucial to the possibility of solidarity across the network. People are implicitly trusted to define their own oppressions and lead their own struggles. This is another death blow to any pretensions of imposing uniform solutions. Anti-colonialism. All of these initiatives and movements exist in contradiction to the project of development, which is the most active manifestation of colonialism in the age of the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations, and all the attendant NGOs. Beyond this common negation, there is a great deal of distance between fully anti-colonial movements that identify capitalism as the enemy without exploring colonization as a historical and ongoing process integral to the globalization of capitalism, and even movements that use the language of development in a bid to access resources or legitimacy. Even among the former currents, there are very different experiences of colonialism across the world, but the heterogeneity of the resistance means those differences do not have to present a problem. I would argue that despite the broad differences in language and scope, these movements' practices open up possibilities for complementarity, and that an expansive anti-colonial consciousness is a priority for increasing their potency. In a use of these terms that is far from universal, I think it is useful to make a distinction between decolonial and anti-colonial. The latest buzzword, decolonial, is now frequently used in academic and activist texts that make no mention of the restoration of indigenous lands, and don't even have the decency to so much as hint at the possibility of abolishing settler states that owe their existence to colonialism, like the United States or Canada. What exactly is decolonization supposed to mean if the fruits and vehicles of colonialism are grandfathered in and accepted as eternal? The distinction I would make is between movements that seek reconciliation and disarmament and those that seek to destroy forces that have been accepted as universal. These latter movements hold out hope for a victory that will undo some of the defeats of the past 500 years, or 2,000 years or longer, depending on the territory we are looking at. Autonomy. People who constitute this international network may be actively trying to subvert and destroy the state, Or they may be looking for some breathing room from state repression in which to carry out their activities. Some may even support an alternative government that might reduce the degree of repression. We may believe that the contest with the state is central to our struggle, or that the state will disappear if people gain some form of economic self-sufficiency. We may reject any contact with the state, or we may try to win access to government resources. Whatever the case, a general practice of autonomy is what allows us to work together and to form cohesive networks of resistance. Autonomy means we write our own rules. We make our own decisions independently of oversight by any party or government. Whatever the provenance of our resources, we make the final decisions about how those resources are used, and we practice self-organization and avoid the centralization of the movement. If one element of these movements maintains a relationship with a political party or a government, they take care not to let that relationship condition their activity in the movement or convert them into a lever by which the government and party can exert influence over the movement. If they fail to uphold either of these minimums, it is widely seen as a breach of solidarity by the rest of the movement. Without autonomy, it is impossible to create a movement of movements, a world in which 1,000 worlds can flourish. These last two characteristics especially, anti-colonialism and autonomy, are the sites of crucial strategic debates. I am very much a partisan in these debates, and I firmly believe that spreading the practices of anti-colonialism and autonomy more or less as I have described them, but certainly without any doctrinaire consensus, is vital to improving the revolutionary potential of our interconnected movements. The framework of autonomy enjoys a special advantage. It is often the default political compass in peasant struggles and indigenous struggles, as well as urban squatting and counterculture movements. The 2006 Oaxaca rebellion that created a large pocket of stateless self-organization for 5 months throughout a large part of the southern Mexican state drew heavily on indigenous traditions for their organizational structures. In the framework of federated assemblies, labor organizers and peasants, indigenous peoples and mestizos, peasants and city dwellers, anarchists and Marxists could all work together. It has become increasingly common for famous writers and green academics to give a nod to social movements by claiming that they are a necessary adjunct to political change. This allows them to acknowledge that the dominant political institutions have a terrible track record when it comes to solving social and ecological problems, without being so radical as to identify those political institutions as one of the sources of the problem. However, they diplomatically avoid any historical analysis of how the relationship between states and social movements always ends up. In her best-selling book in favor of the Green New Deal, On Fire, Naomi Klein reproduces a speech she gave to the UK Labour Party in 2017 while Jeremy Corbyn was leader. In this speech, she urges for a strong relationship between the party and the social movements, claiming that the social movements, quote, have a huge amount to gain from engaging with electoral politics, end quote, though she is remarkably short on details. We didn't have to wait long to see how poorly that wager panned out. Corbyn's own party sabotaged the progressive agenda, ensuring that the only electoral options for the public would be the right and the center. Though I am an anarchist, I have never held a dogmatic position against voting. What is most important is what you do with all the other thousands of hours in a year. The reason I now caution people against engaging with electoral politics is that I have seen the consequences. A clear pattern from the Corbyn campaign in the UK to the Sanders campaign in the US, to the austerity referendum in Greece, to the independence referendum in Catalonia, to the Mas victory in Bolivia, to the constitutional referendum in Chile. Aside from the immense energies and resources wasted in these campaigns to sway a vote rather than to build infrastructure for communities in struggle, there is a clear psychological result. Every single time, when they lost, and even more so if they won, resilient movements that supported these electoral campaigns with a justification of urgency or gradual change became jaded, burnt out, and demobilized in the aftermath. It is as though the symbolic act of voting carries a very real psychological weight, as though we were depositing our hopes in a machine that will inevitably disappoint us. Political parties are unscrupulous in how they will cannibalize social movements and suck them dry. Even in countries where political engagement is most easy to justify on grounds of mere survival, for example, where the old government has direct ties to the military and death squads, alliance with a more progressive government constitutes a dead end, with initial improvements giving way, the pendulum swinging back to old bloody habits in a matter of years. The truce is at best a temporary affair. Context is more important than dogma, and people's survival is paramount. Those who live in a situation where their very survival is threatened shouldn't have to worry about the uninformed disapproval of those for whom the danger is less urgent. But they also shouldn't have any illusions about the inevitable trajectory of state power. This is why building autonomous power and understanding that all the institutions of colonial society endanger us is so important. False pragmatisms, strategies of desperation. Lake Leu, located in the Biobío region of southern South America, is one of the cleanest lakes on the entire continent. Located in the heart of Waumapu, the Mapuche country occupied by the Chilean and Argentinian states since the end of the 19th century, Leu stays clean thanks to the concerted action of the Mapuche communities that surround it. When Winca or colonizer companies start building cabins to attract tourists, and in their wake the promise of jet skis, vehicle traffic, and the sheen of oil and suntan lotion atop the water, Mapuche warriors burn those cabins down. When the Carabineros, Chilean military police, build outposts in the region to protect business ventures from arson or to guard the extensive forestry plantations from Mapuche land reclamation actions, they get burned down too. When mining companies come into the region to prospect, their surveying stakes get removed and their vehicles get destroyed. When the state tries to crack down on this resistance, the communities block all the highways in the region and organize combative protests in the nearby city of Concepcion or the Chilean capital, Santiago. This ongoing victory is a microcosm in which we can tease out the deficiencies of the major proposals for solving the ecological crisis coming from the left. Staying within the bounds of the law or setting the limit at respectable and symbolic civic disobedience is simply unrealistic. In any territory where inhabitants are not collecting the wages of whiteness, there is no clean water without arson, blockades, and clandestine organization. The Mapuche struggle around Heu also belies the idea of decolonization as just a polite word tacked on to the end of a policy proposal that relies on the very institutions of coloniality to solve the problem. In real practice, it means physically and forcefully taking land back, incurring tremendous risks, and entering into conflict with all the institutions of dominant society. Their successes are also a warning against climate reductionism. Within even a moderately technocratic gaze focused on statistics of carbon reduction, Mapuche communities actually become the enemies of the climate, and further repressive action against them can be justified with an environmental logic. As we have seen, a part of the Mapuche struggle involves destroying commercial forestry plantations, the very plantations that from a global technocratic view count as vital carbon sinks and a major part of the Chilean government's strategy to become a celebrated, quote, carbon neutral country. Only with an intensely local perspective can we see that the plantations are not forests and they are actually destroying the land and depleting the water. Once we abandon the technocrat's office and adopt that local perspective, other issues become as important or more important than statistics on atmospheric carbon, defending a sacred lake, restoring specifically native forests, and fighting for food sovereignty. None of these goals are prioritized by the climate movement in the global north. But in fact, they represent a path of struggle that is far more able to address the ecological crisis, including global warming, than a reductionist approach. The civil disobedience movement Extinction Rebellion suffers from climate reductionism in multiple ways. By making almost no reference to the long and diverse history of ecological struggles, it is cutting itself off from the collective learning experiences that infuse our histories of resistance. As I have pointed out elsewhere, historical amnesia is a key feature of nonviolent movements, especially in the last 20 years. By not engaging with the lived histories of struggles and the lessons they present, nonviolent movements shelter themselves from the tactical and strategic evolution that tends to disfavor a dogmatic nonviolence. They also avoid deep analysis of the social situation they face, which protects them from having to study, for example, the repressive mechanisms of the state, or how nonviolence in social movements is a key objective of counterinsurgency strategies. In the case of Extinction Rebellion, they substitute movement histories with statistics promising the success of nonviolent civil disobedience. The statistics, incidentally, come from a study that compares a hand-picked list of ostensible pacifist victories with a database of bloody military conflicts, intentionally leaves out movements that demonstrate the effectiveness of a diversity of tactics, fails to define victory, frequently misrepresents its own results, and was authored in part by a former employee of the U.S. State Department and Defense Department. Needless to say, the statistics were spread widely by corporate media. The political naivete of Extinction Rebellion extends from their methods to their goals, namely the idea of pressuring governments to declare, quote, climate emergencies, end quote, and to support the Paris Agreement. The declaration of a climate emergency is meaningless in policy terms. It is a public relations Christmas for governments on the right and the left, a way for them to clean up their image with another hollow declaration. As for the Paris Agreement, we have seen how inadequate it is. Subsequent action goals like, quote, money strikes, close quote, also tend to be weak on their own, as well as exclusive to those who have money. And the creation of citizens' assemblies with actual decision-making power would require major constitutional reforms, an outcome that hasn't been achieved by peaceful movements. But again, the proposal is easy to co-opt, as governments love consultative bodies with no real power as a way to institutionalize and neutralize demands. Looking at the movement with the very urgency they call for, it seems like Extinction Rebellion is using up an immense amount of resources and the energies of tens of thousands of young people in order to lobby for a few buckets on board the Titanic. But it is worse than a question of inefficiency. Extinction Rebellion's insistence on a single issue focus, they have been frequently criticized for apathy to environmental racism and the marginalization of racialized people in struggles, fails monumentally to address the central question of colonialism and opens the door to eco-fascism. The possibility for a renewed alliance between ecology and white supremacy was established at a critical juncture of the environmental movement in the last century. In the 1960s, environmental consciousness was expanding, manifesting in the works of Murray Bookchin, Rachel Carson, and Vine Deloria Jr. During this period, indigenous struggles achieved global attention, and movements against imperialist wars, including support for the rights of refugees, also blossomed. People could have chosen an integral consciousness that saw the connections between these different struggles. But one sector gravitated toward the defense of an anti-human environment at the exclusion of all other issues, perhaps lured by the donations of the old conservationist aristocracy. Thanks to their unsolidaristic exclusions, we can talk about environmentalism as a white supremacist phenomenon of most interest to progressive whites, but equally useful to fascists of the blood and soil variety who mimic the German Nazi Party's co-optation of early 20th century back to the land movements. Not only has this alliance sullied a large part of the animal rights movement and made inroads into the climate movement, it has leapt to the international stage as when the Austrian Green Party formed a ruling coalition in 2020 with the highly xenophobic OVP, or Austrian Volksparty, who had recently ruled with the literal neo-Nazis of the Freedom Party. It remains to be seen whether Extinction Rebellion will have staying power or whether it will disappear like other astroturfed movements before it. Whatever the case, the strategy of lobbying the government for emergency measures will remain dominant as long as there exists a capitalist media to redirect all social conflicts into dialogue with the institutions of power. The Green New Deal is the main proposal on the left, and in a social democratic framework, it makes a lot of sense. It directs massive public spending to pay for a total infrastructure overhaul, completing the transition to renewable energy, while also increasing social spending to ameliorate the inequalities that have provoked growing crises in nearly all the world's democracies. At the same time, government-subsidized production may be enough to trigger a new industrial expansion and leave behind the crisis of accumulation global capitalism has been dragging in its wake since 2007, and in some senses since the 1970s. In a stroke, the Green New Deal could resolve the three interconnected crises that threaten the state: the ecological crisis, democracy's crisis of legitimacy, and capitalism's crisis of accumulation. In truth, the GND should be catechism for the most ardent defenders of the current system, toppling as it is. But it seems that nearly everyone is one long step behind events. Conservatives, locked in their perpetual existential crisis, are too threatened by the updating of their privileges that they are further destabilizing the system they are trying to protect, as always. Centrists are trying to preserve a middle ground where there is none. And so it has fallen on progressives, many of them avowed anti-capitalists, to become capitalism's last line of defense. Economists have largely acknowledged that the current model of permanent deficit spending by governments is in fact feasible, with governments always spending beyond their budgets. However, it is only possible to avoid major defaults and economic collapse if governments continue to service interest payments, which they can only do if their economies keep growing, giving them a higher GDP and higher incomes year after year. The massive expenditures of the Green New Deal require an increase in deficit spending, which in turn requires a constant increase in the overall volume of the economy. Any Green New Deal would mean giving up on any hopes of degrowth in favor of the dubious proposition that infinite economic growth can in fact be healthy and sustainable on a finite planet. Some have tried to revive this pipe dream by conjuring up a slanted portrayal of the information economy, suggesting that its processes are creative, affective, and ethereal, therefore not dependent on material extraction. The Bitcoin boom, with appropriately named Bitcoin miners now using more energy than many mid-sized countries, should put to rest any doubts that capitalism is always fundamentally extractive. All value chains eventually come back to killing ecosystems and selling the corpses. Despite promises of spending for social justice programs, the GND remains climate reductionist. It will increase the amount of destruction caused by so-called green energies by several orders of magnitude, add new devastating infrastructures for carbon capture and storage, spur wars and coups for copper, lithium, and cobalt, and it will create a multi-trillion-dollar market for land, carbon sinks, sites for wind and photovoltaic production, biofuels, that will be the death knell for small farmers, peasants, and indigenous communities the world over. By richly incentivizing carbon sinks, world governments and NGOs are laying the groundwork for a massive land grab that is set to match the scale of the invasions and colonization of the 16th to 18th centuries. Expanding the market for carbon, whether through tax credits or major government subsidies, will be a huge boon to the logging industry, to energy companies, and to agribusiness, as remaining agricultural lands will have to shift towards more intensive, infrastructure-heavy, market-oriented production. It is easy to see why Wall Street and the luminaries of big business tend to be tepidly in favor of the Green New Deal or similar proposals. The G&D means a massive amount of government funding and tax credits, and companies like Microsoft, Tesla, Google, and forward-thinking oil companies like BP are the best positioned to capture that money. The main point of reticence is that the G&D would increase governmental intervention and control over the economy, just as the original New Deal constituted a transfer of, quote, control over world liquidity from London and Wall Street to Washington, end quote, in the words of Giovanni Arrighi. Nearly all the projects we looked at in Chapter 3 are short on resources. All of them can use more support, but none of them are calling for billions of dollars of infusions and government money, precisely because they know that would destroy them. Monetizing the cracks in the system where they have been able to thrive, bringing in major corporations eager to profit off human and ecosystem services, and in the global south, increasing the funding for paramilitary death squads far beyond what the drug and logging industries were ever able to provide. A reference to Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal that pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression, the G&D set itself up for an illuminating and accurate historical comparison. The original New Deal brought to bear immense government resources to stimulate the economy and create employment. It is often associated with the beginning of Keynesian economics, governments running deficits to actively intervene in the economy in coordination with the central bank. Though the New Deal is lionized by progressives, it presents a curious illusion for the environmental movement, given how it was exemplified by the construction of mega projects like hydroelectric dams that displaced tens of thousands of small farmers and destroyed entire river valleys, or more than 1 million kilometers of roads and highways that scarred the land and constituted an infrastructural handout to the automobile industry that would come to dominate the architecture of American life, as well as becoming a principal source of air pollution. True, the New Deal also included reforestation and soil conservation efforts in response to the Dust Bowl. However, government aid was designed not to restore the health of the land, but to continue commercial agriculture. The Dust Bowl only ended when rainfall patterns returned to normal in the region, and while soil conservation improved, other ecocidal practices continued, as evidenced by ongoing desertification today, as well as the dead zone in the Mississippi River Delta. The New Deal has a sheen of social justice due to a few programs that challenged oppressive inequalities. The Federal Writers Project, for example, paid writers to record oral histories of certain populations, most famously documenting the memories of thousands of elderly Black people, the survivors of the last generation to live through slavery. While there is a clear value in such projects of historical memory, the Federal Writers Project manifested and reinforced the very inequalities that were being addressed, as typically occurs when governments throw money at a problem of social justice. Most of the writers getting government checks to survive the extreme misery of the Depression and record the memories of slavery's last survivors were not Black, but Southern whites, many of them from families who had profited off of slavery and off the sharecropping that followed it. Even Naomi Klein, in her book In Favor of the G&D, acknowledges that the original New Deal was deployed because it, quote, appeared at the time to be the only way to hold back a full-scale revolution, end quote. It provided the handouts and the funding to weaken or institutionalize social movements, getting them under control and within the framework of well-paid, institutionalized labor unions and full employment underwritten by the government. It replaced the revolutionary internationalism of the workers' movement, a movement that launched mutinies throughout World War I and countless general strikes, insurrections, and revolutions at the war's end, with the narrowed horizons of patriotism. The New Deal set the stage for the weakness of revolutionary movements after World War II, for the nationalism and conservatism of the Cold War, and all the assaults on workers' rights and social justice that entailed. Historically, social democracy has always planted the seed of its own destruction. That's exactly what the Green New Deal does. It prevents a real solution. It kills off our best chance for a better world in order to save capitalism, to kick the can down the road or more realistically, into the laps of the people who will bear the brunt of this new industrial onslaught. The Green New Deal is colonialism as usual. Assad Rehman calls it green colonialism and points out that the green energy transition of the Green New Deal is reliant on the same economic structures that have caused the problem. He also underscores the danger of the mining boom a green transition would require. Quote, resource extraction is responsible for 50% of global emissions, close quote, as well as a great deal of violence against poor communities from the Democratic Republic of Congo to Chile, he says. Quote, at the heart of our economic system, fueled by the City of London, is a belief that the UK and other rich countries are entitled to a greater share of the world's finite resources, irrespective of who we impoverish in doing so, or the destruction we cause. This green colonialism will be delivered by the very same entrenched economic interests who have willingly sacrificed both people and the climate in the pursuit of profit. But this time, the mining giants and dirty energy companies will be waving the flag of climate emergency to justify the same deathly business model, end quote. By trying to capture existing channels for economic action on a global scale, the G&D will inevitably plug into the institutional pathways and Eurocentric framework of development, a thinking and practice that has been roundly criticized as racist. As Rajni Kothari put it, quote, where colonialism left off, development took over, end quote. Massive funding for green energy and industrial-scaled carbon sinks is already producing an outsized impact on the global south. In Mozambique, quote, consistent with other African contexts, end quote, the biofuels industry, expanding as a direct result of European governments' renewable energy targets, quote, legitimizes and greenwashes acts of land grabbing to the detriment of some of the most marginalized in society, causing entire communities to be displaced, leading to food insecurity, resource deprivation, social polarization, and political instability, end quote, and quote, constituting vast spiritual and cultural loss, end quote. Good intentions are about as widespread as bad results. The pervasive racism of the development paradigm, of the existing institutional pathways for directing global interventions, is too systematic for this blunt instrument to be corrected with a more liberal application of decolonization rhetoric. Some authors and organizers do take these tendencies into account, and they offer proposals for a Green New Deal that would make sure money directly reached those most in need, that it would be used to empower communities and overcome the legacies of racism and colonialism without funding the hyper-exploitative markets I have warned about. The problem with these proposals is that they read like a wish list for an ideal world. They do not come with examples of government programs that have ever achieved similar results in the past. If the Green New Deal were actually carried out in such a way, it would strip the very people who make up the government of their wealth and power. Even stable democracies like the United States and United Kingdom would see a military coup before those who hold power would allow a policy one half as radical to be legislated. Nowhere is there a government with more than a tiny handful of representatives willing to propose such policies. Another proposed response to the ecological crisis is eco-Leninism, or war communism. for the climate crisis. Some iterations of this proposal focus on the method, creating a vanguard cadre organization to lead the climate movement. And others focus on the finality, strong governments that will ruthlessly use their regulatory and punitive powers to get their houses in order. In terms of substance, this proposal is little more than tough talk. It does pose a danger, though, because if the past is any guide, and it usually is, authoritarian and vanguardist formations can grow quickly when the dominant institutions are facing collapse. Their destiny is usually to make some kind of alliance with those in power, either to betray, institutionalize, and repress revolutionary movements, or to create a new system with many components of the old one and all the oppressive baggage they drag with them. The comparison to war communism can be attributed to Andrew Malm. Like the Green New Deal, it seems a poorly thought out historical illusion. The USSR was a fully ecocidal regime. As a revolutionary experiment, it left the most interesting questions unanswered. How much might we have learned from urban Soviets and factory councils, creating direct relationships with rural councils of peasants and food producers during the Russian Revolution? Lenin prohibited this direct self-organization by the proletariat between November and December of 1917. How much might we have learned from Alexander Chayanov, the author of Peasant Farm Organization and a proponent of small-scale cooperative farming as opposed to large-scale state-run farms? He was executed on Stalin's orders in October 1937. As for war communism, that was nothing but a bald euphemism used to describe the Red Army's bloody plunder of the countryside to keep alive the two primary instruments of Bolshevik power during the Civil War, the army itself and the urban party bureaucrats. War communism was substantially identical to what any army will do when it doesn't have supply lines to a productive and stable hinterland. It corresponded not to any vision of social transformation, but to the interests and power struggles of the moment. How are we to interpret this as a proposal that states today might carry out? What state will use its regulatory powers so ruthlessly, not in its own interests, but against its own economic elite? And what major states even have a vanguard party remotely close to being able to grow over the next few years, take over and implement this war communism against polluters? The proposal is completely out of touch with the social movements that actually exist today, the movements that comprise the only force for change not beholden to the economic and political interests destroying the planet. The movements behind nearly all the major revolts since the collapse of the USSR share several emergent characteristics: multitudinous actions, largely at the margins of all formal organizations, a skepticism towards dialogue with existing institutions, and instead a tendency to disrupt their managerial dominance, a revolutionary organizational framework that is specifically anti-vanguardist, that seeks to create spaces of dialogue across social movements, rather than controlling such movements, and that breaks with the statist practice of subsuming revolution to a military contest, and an emphasis on assembly-based decision-making structures, frequently traditional and indigenous in origin, as more legitimate and more liberatory than state structures. Even historically Leninist movements from Venezuela to Kurdistan have been shifting to more autonomous frameworks. The social movements that exist today are not building the kinds of power that would be useful to the project of taking over the state, and that is very good news. Since the post-war demassification of the proletarian and the growing strength of anti-colonial, anti-racist, and anti-patriarchal struggles have multiplied the lines of struggle, homogenizing organizations like parties have not been able to express the aspirations of social movements. They have tended towards insularity and social conservatism, or they have taken advantage of sudden booms to make inspiring promises, forestall their inevitable collapse, and rush into the halls of power, institutionalizing as much of the social movement as they can, and gaining access to government funding and more opaque forms of financing as the only way to stay alive. I think the major reason such unrealistic proposals, all coming down to trusting the government to solve things, have been flourishing is desperation. We feel weak. Millions of people are dying. Millions of species are threatened with extinction right now. And every year emissions only increase. The point of no return might already have slipped by. Our movements are not as strong as they need to be, and so it seems that the best hope is for someone to wave a magic wand and make things better. We certainly don't have any magic wands, but from down here it seems the government might. The protections governments offer are often illusory. They have a perfectly abysmal track record for honoring their emissions targets, their biodiversity targets, their treaties. Ashley Dawson's book, Extreme Cities, is full of examples of how major cities from Miami to New York, faced with the existential threat that they will soon be underwater, have wasted decades with bureaucratic regulations that are little more than evasions. So how will government regulation be transformed into a machine efficient enough to hang our lives on? This seems to be the crucial strategic question for those who pin their hopes on the state. How do you make the state function differently to how it has always functioned? Where are the models from the past that show states work effectively to protect their people, all their people, and their environments without resorting to some kind of resource imperialism? Occasionally, we can find vague suggestions that social movements will force governments to stay the course. So if social movements are the key component for resolving the climate crisis, why don't all the books that advocate a Green New Deal or a robust regulatory state give social movements a voice and make social movements the protagonists of their story, sharing their specific experiences, methodologies, and proposals? Why don't they present us with histories of social movements and governments achieving fruitful collaborations? They do not because they cannot. Because the more they propose governmental solutions to our problems, the more distanced and deafened they are to the movements. And because the history of our movements shows that the relationship with governments, on balance, is an antagonistic one. Governments are machines designed to allow the upper classes to exert pressure on the rest of society. They do not work the other way around. They are about as reversible as a telescope. They limit the horizons of possibility rather than expanding them. Nor is it sensible to place our faith in progressive or revolutionary governments, because even these remain part of an interlocking global system they cannot simply wish away. To fund social programs and import food, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela had to encourage oil extraction to generate foreign revenue, leading to violent conflicts with indigenous communities whose lands are degraded by oil production. Nonetheless, cheerleaders in the global north are easy to fool. In Tiquipaya, Bolivia in 2010, when Evo Morales hosted the World People's Conference on Climate Change and the Rights of Mother Earth, his administration merely had to hide all the sawmills on the road leading to the conference site with billboards, confident none of the international attendants would speak with locals or inquire after ongoing deforestation. A few years later, he mobilized his union supporters to attack indigenous marchers with dynamite as they protested the construction of a major highway through their territory, exposing the Western Amazon to a development boom. It was the kind of mega project the earlier right-wing government would never have been able to get away with. In fact, it benefited from the superficial anti-imperialism spread by the populist left that reduces everything to puppeteering by the US government, ignoring how capitalism actually implants itself in every territory it touches. While the devastation was carried out by Bolivian companies and Brazilian capital, its opponents were denounced as agents of the CIA, culminating in the aforementioned attack, as well as an anti-terrorism campaign against local anarchists. Silvia Rivera Cusicanqui characterizes the Morales government as, quote, craving centralized power and putting an Indian face to corporate capitalism, end quote. Across the political spectrum, governmental environmentalism endangers us. It does not make us safer. As environmental inputs and outputs are increasingly monetized, subjected to rational measurement, we draw ever closer to the dystopia of a technocratic control of the environment, which will also translate into more technocratic control of humanity. Neither is this an overly paranoid vision. Smart city plans systematically bond green proposals with increased AI-based surveillance, and MI5 was recently caught funding research on agricultural drones that also doubled for rural surveillance. Reflecting the class interests and the worldview of the technocrats themselves, all of these proposals enact power as a lever that operates on inert others. To them, the territory is a map, and theirs is the hand that holds the pencil that will redraw it. Deep down, they can never trust the intelligence of the territory, nor locate themselves within it. They cannot surrender themselves to the dialogue, the dance, with a specific territory, nor meld into the reciprocal relationship that is the earth healing itself. Modern-day missionaries, they fail to accept that they are not needed to save anyone, and that is why they remain a part of the problem. To quote Erastu Feliciu, again, of Teia dos Povos, those who have not yet territorialized and organized their community cannot lead a fight for land and territory. Since I am an anarchist, it would be easy for many of those whose proposals I am criticizing to chalk up my rejection of the state to a merely ideological position. For me, though, anarchism does not mean converting everyone to my way of thinking. It is a methodology for building a world in which 1,000 worlds can fit. The proposal that heterogeneous social movements require autonomy from the state in order to work together would be rather limited if only fellow anarchists saw the benefits of such autonomy. So I spoke with someone who, like me, prioritizes ecological struggle and rejects the colonial project, but who has a very different political background. In Chapter 2, Adriana Quena described the interrelated problems of expertise and whiteness. We also learned about her experiences in the Chavista movement in Venezuela, where she was part of numerous initiatives that sought government resources or that collaborated in some way with the government. Often this was a way to win some breathing room after the brutal right-wing governments of the past and the ongoing violence of the US and Colombian-backed economic elite that still holds a great deal of power in Venezuela, a stranglehold, it might be noted, that Chavez was unable to break, and that in some cases has intensified. Calculations of urgency make sense in this context. Quote, "For us, climate collapse already began some years ago," end quote. Even though we differ on the proposition of a revolutionary government, it is heartening that we come to many of the same conclusions regarding the tendencies of governmental action and the need for social movements to cultivate their autonomy. A key figure that took on a central importance in our conversations was the technocratic gaze, how it constitutes a continuation of colonialism, maintains its hold even on revolutionary governments, and is fatal to any lasting solution for the ecological crisis. In Adriana Cana's words, "At one extreme, we have the philanthropy of foreign NGOs. For example, I can briefly describe the case in which the French oil company Total, as part of its greenwashing policies, had the great idea of installing solar panels in the Amacuro Delta in Venezuela so that some Warao communities could have access to electricity. In this case, a concrete need such as being able to charge mobile phones, provide lighting for the schools, run a television for the families gathered around to watch kung fu movies, run a refrigerator, is satisfied through an expertise in renewable energy. But going over the heads of the communitarian indigenous logics of authority, decision-making, and management of resources, and then afterwards never taking care of the maintenance and leaving the Warao territory in an absolute mess, full of trashed panels, quote, renewable in name only, and with various intra-community conflicts. Another failed attempt by the modern technocratic paratrooper method, or paracaidismo, a rather visual metaphor for the experts who parachute out of an airplane with no idea where they'll land. On the other end, we have the government institution that sends a technician to try to resolve a local agricultural problem, for example, with a solution straight out of an agronomy manual that is nothing but propaganda for the poorly named Green Revolution. They worry about output as though it were an isolated affair. They are obsessed with the quantitative because that is what they can write up in their spreadsheet. They are concerned with their technological packet, seeds, agrotoxins, machinery, sold to them by a provider, almost always a foreign company, who has already entered into the ledgers. They don't have the capacity to dialogue with that which already exists. They don't see the potential of an agro-ecosystem beyond what is written in their manual from the Netherlands or Canada. Their recipe requires bringing in almost everything from the outside, sweeping away that which already exists, forgetting local knowledge, the comprehension of the relations that exist there. Ignore the spiritual dimension, of course, and convert everything into a neutral substrate so as to begin from zero, like in the laboratory. This subject, whitened, moderned, and technified, does not listen, and with his design, he degrades. And if, as in this case, he is a representative of the state, vested with the authority of the very institutionality that measures your access to basic rights, it's even more difficult. It is always a matter of whiteness and specialization. There is this myth that the territory can always be controlled and domesticated. Maybe in territories where domestication and the imperial logic have been established for thousands of years, like large parts of Europe, this can make sense. But in many of the places that are today known as the Americas, the history is different. The dialogue with the territory and with all the beings that inhabit it has not been one of domestication by control and subjugation, but rather of coexistence and symbiosis. If we root the topic of quality and sustainability in more political dimensions connected to the climate, we can see how in Venezuela, the merely quantitative and homogenizing logic of the technocracy obstructed the development of popular power, which is power that is territorialized and from below. The diversification of the economy, the redesigning of education, in the most opportune moment for all those things, which was during the government of Hugo Chavez. This transformed the self-perception people had of their own agency and generated the construction of a new local political class that, because it can speak the language of the institutions, it can adapt its mentality to these quantitative approximations, a reductionism of goals, objectives, number of beneficiaries, zeros and commas, that accumulated privileges and ignored problems, often the most important ones, instead of solving less pressing problems that were easier to express in their language. The government is almost entirely constituted by the so-called mestiza middle class, or more accurately, white passing and urban, and they do what they can, but with the interpretive limitations of not knowing the territory and with their ambitions of completing the process of becoming white. The technocracy is impatient. It needs quick results to fill in the numbers in the spreadsheet so it can say whether a project was implemented or not, to guarantee votes and so on. This idea of a mixed public communal model always tended more toward an inefficient statism and less towards the communal. It gradually disempowered the peasant organizations and the families, and this opened the way for state management that enabled networks of corruption controlled by old and new capitalists, but in the hands of the state rather than in the historical rich families of the area. The greater the autonomy and the popular control that was achieved in terms of organization and evaluation defined from within the territory, the greater the sustainability they have demonstrated in the long term, even under the immense pressures of an international blockade and a pandemic. The end of Adriana Quena's words. Ecological revolution, the best strategy in success or failure. Transforming the solutions we project also means transforming our understanding of the kind of methods that will get us there. Quote, "Today, all belong to the ruling class who look at their own lives from above," end quote. The anarchist essay, 23 Theses Concerning Revolt, elaborates this idea of an embodied strategy. Quote, "All military strategy is to impose an ideal plan on the map that represents reality. If we do not intend to make a military campaign, we must refuse to see the revolution as something organized according to a unified plan, as if it were a game of Risk. We are not looking down from above, giving orders. We are here, in the midst of a beautiful chaos that our enemies always try to organize. We will be stronger than ever if we learn to triumph in this chaos, to move in the network of our own relationships, to communicate horizontally or circularly, to use only what really is ours, and to influence others, to understand that not everyone is going to act as we act. That is the beauty of rebellion, and our effectiveness in it does not lie in making the whole world equal, but in devising the best way to relate in a complementary way to those who are different and follow different paths," end quote. The paradigm shift in our concept of revolution dovetails with the paradigm shift in our relationship with the planet and its inhabitants. We need to perceive quote, an ecosystem of revolt, end quote, in which, instead of trying to control what everyone is doing, promote the right ideas and suppress the wrong ideas. We understand our niche and create relationships of reciprocity with those around us, making us all stronger and healthier rather than making us all the same. It is such an ecosystem that is most able to combine collective knowledge and local situated knowledge, allowing the decentralization of intelligence rather than continued reliance on the experts and leaders who have brought us into this crisis. A part of this approach means accepting that we will never convince everyone. Others will continue to fight in legal channels, seeking limited reform or government funding. There can still be instances of synergy, even with those who remain in such a diametrically opposed paradigm. On the one hand, we can take advantage of resources intended for other uses, such as the people in the small town in the US planting thousands of trees subsidized by the state. In other cases, we might get to know sympathetic bureaucrats or academics who are able to pass resources to our projects and support our struggles, as with a couple of academics who supported this book, or the radical academic from Borneo who uses their research to support indigenous communities in struggle. Each alliance should be evaluated on whether it helps us or hinders us from building the kind of decentralized communal power that we need. Rejecting technocratic unity or party dogmatism in our movements does not mean embracing an acritical relativism in which all ideas are equally valid. It is not an ecosystem of revolt if there is no revolt. One of the most important tasks today, which we must spread as energetically as we can, is to develop revolutionary horizons with as many people and communities as possible, precisely because the state, with all its appendages, has spent so many decades extinguishing even the thought of revolution. Revolutionary movements come with several key advantages. Only by fighting for revolutionary transformations that present an existential threat to the existing order, for example, a world without rich people, without police, without governors, without corporations, have we ever achieved important concessions. All of the labor laws, paid vacations, limited working days, rent controls, public health care, unemployment benefits, and safety regulations that are being chipped away year by year are the vestiges of reforms won by revolutionary movements of anarchists and communists in the first part of the 20th century, or since then by the organizations arising from these movements and institutionalized as a way to pacify them. In other words, when we fight for revolution, we win even when we lose. We cannot, however, view revolutionary movements as simply a bargaining chip. As long as the power to organize our lives is alienated from us and concentrated in the institutions that rule us, any improvement we are granted will be steadily worn away, starting the moment we no longer present a threat. Revolutionary movements taking direct action to, quote, destroy what destroys us, end quote, raise consciousness and force all of society to talk about problems the media and government had caused us to ignore. When we meet in the streets in the heat of rebellion, we place all our isolated problems in common and realize how much we share. Whether you are looking at fracking rigs in Pennsylvania or wind parks in Oaxaca, big businesses and the government that support them operate in a cloak of secrecy, isolating people and getting them to sign away their lands one by one. When people fight back, such as when they built a barricade to stop armed detachments from erecting wind turbines in Ho'oko, Oaxaca. They, quote, created space to question these projects, end quote. And even though that particular wind project was constructed thanks to a complex counterinsurgency campaign that deployed all kinds of mercenaries, from paid assassins and neighborhood snitches to marketing strategists, NGO workers, and academics, battle lines were drawn that continue to facilitate resistance in the rest of the region, while the people who nominally lost this conflict were able to negotiate better conditions. In the United States for over 40 years, the dominant narrative was that the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s had ended systemic racism. It was only when multiracial, black-led crowds fought police and smashed wealthy businesses in Oakland after the police murder of Oscar Grant in 2009, and when they did the same on a much larger scale after the police murder of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, that white supremacy became the subject of public conversation. This was thanks to a completely acephalous movement that came alive through many other revolts of varying size across the country, and that blended spaces of conversation, spaces of healing, spaces of occupation and transformation, and spaces of counterattack, vengeance, and wealth redistribution. Significantly, most of the mainstream media that kept systemic racism going strong by serving as the propaganda arm for the war on drugs and avoiding serious reporting on any of the facets of white supremacy, by 2014 were forced to acknowledge that racism was still a problem. And as uncomfortable as it is for those who would turn the movement into a lucrative NGO that refuses to support its prisoners, or into a democratic voting machine, in 2020 that movement manifested again in a huge way and forced all of society, at least for several months, to consider a very radical idea that just a few years earlier would have been inconceivable at that scale: abolishing the police entirely. And the most eloquent opening gesture to that debate was to manifest the idea of abolishing the police by burning the 3rd Precinct police station of Minneapolis down to the ground. Similar to the Arab Spring of 2011, the revolt in Minneapolis sent shockwaves across the world, advancing conversations about racism and spreading tactics of collective self-defense against the police in the UK, France, Brazil, and beyond. The ability of movements with revolutionary horizons to raise consciousness and shift the limits of the debate is beyond question. But it is also fully wrapped up with another important concern: shifting the balance of power. In the US especially, the police are a central institution. Abolishing them means abolishing the US in its entirety as a capitalist settler state. It was unavoidable that anyone unable to conceive of such a revolutionary horizon would gradually replace abolishing the police with defunding the police, and from there, many of them would move on to support increased police funding in order to pay for the cameras or improved sensitivity training that would supposedly put an end to hundreds of years of history. If we do not have the power to abolish such a huge, ugly machine as the US and replace it with something better, healthier, very few of us have the power to imagine abolishing its component parts. Likewise, if we do not have the power to take over our territory, feed ourselves through ecocentric relations, and abolish ecocidal industries, few of us will have the power to imagine any solution that does not involve the government coming in and waving a magic wand. Having a revolutionary horizon requires us to build power, a revolutionary kind of power that corresponds to our own needs and ways of living. Fortunately, revolutionary movements are uniquely suited to building decentralized power. In contrast, reformist movements only strengthen centralized power, both by solidifying the authority's role as arbiter and by funneling massive amounts of resources away from social movements for the purpose of lobbying. Envisioning revolutionary horizons and building power out of our own activity and the collective satisfaction of our own needs and desires. The kind of power that cannot prop up a new oppressive system, inevitably reveals all the intersecting lines of oppression and resistance. This is the terrain in which we see how climate change, industrial pollution, patriarchy, borders, white supremacy, mass extinction, accumulation by dispossession, and colonialism are inextricable. By definition, this kind of revolution means changing the paradigm. In a society in which even environmentalism has become a tool for ravaging the earth and its inhabitants, smashing the dominant paradigm is a necessity we can no longer elide. That is why we need to fight for a revolution and try our hardest to win. Putting an end to a system that by its very nature produces misery would be the best future for all of us. If we fight in a way that is consistent with the world we want to defend, then every step we take, even if we don't make it all the way, leaves the world a better place and could make the difference between life and death for a person, a community, an ecosystem that right now is under threat. Recognizing that we live only thanks to a beautiful web of relationships with countless other beings, nurturing those relationships is the best possible way to live. It is a revolution that transforms our present, honors our past, and offers the best hope for ending an apocalypse that has been going on for too long, moving toward a future where we can all finally begin to heal.
This has been a production of Audible Anarchist. You can find more Audible
People want to know how to stop the laziness. They want to know how to stop the procrastination. They have some idea in their head, some kind of a vision of what they want to do, but they don't know where to start. And so they say, hey, where do I start? And when's the best time to start? Where do I start? And when's the best time to start? Where do I start? And when's the best time to start? And I have a very simple answer for that. Here and now. That's it. You want to improve? You want to get better? You want to get on a workout program or a clean diet? You want to start a business? You want to write a book or make a movie or build a house or a computer or put together some mobile application? Where do you start? You start right here. And when do you start? You start right now. Right now. Right now. You initiate the action aggressively. You go. workout program or a clean diet? You want to start a business? You want to write a book or make a movie or build a house or a computer or put together some mobile application? The idea isn't going to execute itself. And the book isn't going to write itself. And the weights out in the gym, they're not going to move themselves. You have to do it. And you have to do it now. And that means you got to stop thinking about it and stop dreaming about it and stop researching every aspect of it and reading all about it and debating the pros and cons of it. Just start doing it. You want to improve? You want to get better? You want to get on a workout program or a clean diet? You want to start a business? You want to write a book or make a movie or build a house or a computer or put together some mobile application? You want to improve? You want to get better? Go. You want to improve? You want to get better? Take that first step and make it happen. Get after it. And get after it here and now. I'm pretty happy. I got a good job. I got a good family. I got a nice house. I'm in pretty good shape. Sometimes I skip workouts, and sometimes I sleep in, and sometimes I eat bad. And how can I find more discipline? Akira, you could be lying to yourself. That could be the problem. How is that? You can be lying to yourself by saying, I'm really happy. That can be a lie. And there's a chance you are, right? There's a chance. I got a good job. I got a good family. I got a house. I'm in pretty good shape. There's a chance. And if that's the scenario, good. You know what? Don't worry about getting more disciplined. You're happy. You got a good job. You got a good family. You got a house. You got a car. Everything's good. That's fine. But there's a chance that that's not fine. There's a chance that you're lying to yourself. Because you know you could be better. And there's something in your mind that's saying you could be better. And you know it. And you know that the way you could get better, and the way you could do better, and the way you could be more is by having more discipline. So, discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Because if you tell yourself the truth, and the truth is, I'm not happy with where I'm at. That's the truth. The truth is, I can do more. The truth is, I can be in better shape. The truth is, I can work harder than I'm working right now. The truth is, I can do more for my family. The truth is, I can do much better than I'm doing right now. If that's what you believe, if you believe that to be the truth, you won't have to find more discipline. Discipline will find you. It will wake you up in the morning. Have you ever been preparing for something and you didn't think you were ready and you couldn't sleep and you wake up in the morning because it's happening? Isn't that interesting? So, when you're going through life and you truly feel like you could do better and you could do more and you truly feel that way, you think about that, I have a hard time sleeping. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. You can lie to yourself and say, you know what? I'm good to go. Like, I'm not worried about this operation. We're good to go. And everything will probably go fine. You sleep all night like a little baby. If you lie to yourself and you're like, I'm in pretty good shape. My family's doing fine. I like this house that I'm in. If that's the lie that you're telling yourself, maybe you can sleep just fine. And maybe it's hard to be disciplined. So what you need to do is you need to tell yourself the truth about what the hell is going on in your life. Do an assessment. Break out a piece of paper and start to write down these things that you claim to be happy about. Pull the stops off. Like, okay, if I could have any house I wanted, is this house the house else I wanted. Is it? Is it really? You sure about that? Hey, I'm in pretty good shape right now. You sure about that? If I could snap my fingers in a different physical shape, is this what I would choose? Or would I want to be a little bit better? Would I want to be stronger, faster? Then you gotta ask yourself, you sure about that? Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself.
Alright, now my workout plan for the next 2 months.
So tell yourself the truth about the situation that you're in. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. And it should hurt a little bit. It should hurt a little bit. There should be aspects of your life that you know you can improve upon. That should hurt a little bit. Here's the cool thing. Take ownership of those things and guess what? Doesn't hurt at all. Now guess who's in control? You are.
What do you do on the days when you're just not feeling it? Akira.
Those days. Those days. Those days when I'm tired or worn out or just basically sick of the grind. What do I do on those days? I go anyways. I get it done. Even if I'm just going through the motions. I go through the motions. I don't really want to work out. I work out. I really don't want to hammer on a project. I hammer on the project. Don't really want to get up and get out of bed. I don't want to do anything. Yeah, I get up and get out of bed. Those days. Those days. Those days. Those days. Now, these could be signals that you need some time off. And those signals might be right. They could be correct. But don't take today off. Not today. Wait until tomorrow. Don't give in to the immediate gratification that is whispering in your ear. Shut that down. Do not listen to that little voice. Instead, go through the motions. Lift the weights. Sprint the hill. Work on the project. Get out of bed. Lift the weights. Sprint the hill. Work on the project. Get out of bed. Those days. Those days. Those days. Those days when I'm tired or worn out, I get it done. Those days. Those days. As an overall rule, I do not like procrastination. You need to get things done, but if you are going to rest, that is one thing that you should procrastinate on. That's the one thing I want you to put off until tomorrow. And if, when tomorrow comes, you still feel like you need to rest or you need to take a break, okay, take it. But the chances are you won't. You won't need that rest consequences are, you will realize that the desire to rest was just weakness. It was just the desire to take the path of least resistance, the downhill path, the easy path. And by simply going through the motions, you overcame that path. And you stayed on the righteous path, the disciplined path. You stayed on the war path, which is right where you know that you belong. Those days, those days, those days, those days when I'm tired or worn out, I get it done. Those days, those days.
He wanted you to learn the secret style of discipline.
Does discipline ever fail you? No. Actually, discipline does not fail me. I fail discipline. That's what happens on days where I veer off the path and onto the slippery slope of weakness. It isn't discipline's fault. It's my fault. I'm the one that's being weak. It's my fault. I'm the one that's not holding the line. I'm the one that is deciding to take the short-term gratification instead of the long-term domination. When I make that error, when I let discipline down, there's only one thing to do. And that's get back on the path. Get back on it. Get back on the path. Get back on it. Get back on the path. Get back on it. Step it up and go harder. does good apply to the worst of losses, the death of a loved one? It's easy to think that there's nothing good in death. But then I remember the people I have lost throughout my life. The memories of them, the experiences, the fun, their unique personalities, and everything they gave me, not only in their life, but in their death. What their life taught me and what their death taught me. The mark they had left on me. And I realized there is good. Even in death, there is good. Even in death, there is good. There is good. Even in death, there is good. First of all, I was lucky enough to have had that person in my life, even if it was only for a short time. Too short a time. At least I got that. Those precious moments, those unforgettable memories. At least I got those and got to experience those times, to know the beauty of their personality, their attitude, their outlook on the world. They were all unique, and I am thankful for the opportunity I had to interact with them. Now comes death. Death is horrible, death is wretched, and death is cruel. And death isn't fair. And I don't know why the best people seem to be taken from us first. Death is also inescapable. There is no way out. No one gets out alive. Death is part of life, like the contrast between the darkness and the light. Without death, there is no life. There is good. Even in death, there is good. There is good. Even in death, there is good. And the people that I have lost, they taught me that. They taught me how precious life is, how blessed we are to have every day, to learn, to grow, to laugh, to live, to live every day with purpose and passion, to wake up in the morning and be thankful, thankful for that morning, thankful for that opportunity to go into the world and live for them, for those that don't have the opportunity, for those who were stolen away by death's cruel hand. For them, I will live. I will revere their memory, and I will live. I will live. There is good. Even in death, there is good. There is good. Even in death, there is good. There is good. Even in death, there is good. So, let us cry no more. Let us mourn no more. Let us remember, but let us not dwell. Instead, let us laugh and love, and let us embrace and venerate everything that life is and every opportunity it gives us. Let us live for those who live no more. Let us live to honor them. happy, I got a good job, I got a good family, I got a nice house, I'm in pretty good shape. Sometimes I skip workouts, and sometimes I sleep in, and sometimes I eat bad. How can I find more discipline?
Akira.
You could be lying to yourself. That could be the problem. How is that? You can be lying to yourself by saying, I'm really happy. That can be a lie. And there's a chance you are, right? There's a chance. I got a good job. I got a good family. I got a house. I'm in pretty good shape. There's a chance. And if that's the scenario, good. You know what? Don't worry about getting more discipline. You're happy. You got a good job. You got a good family. You got a house. You got a car. Everything's good. That's fine. But there's a chance that that's not fine. There's a chance that you're lying to yourself. Because you know you could be better. And there's something in your mind that's saying you could be better. And you know it. And you know that the way you could get better, and the way you could do better, and the way you could be more is by having more discipline. So, discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Because if you tell yourself the truth, and the truth is, I'm not happy with where I'm at. That's the truth. The truth is, I can do more. The truth is, I can be in better shape. The truth is, I can work harder than I'm working right now. The truth is, I can do more for my family. The truth is, I can do much better than I'm doing right now. If that's what you believe, if you believe that to be the truth, you won't have to find more discipline. Discipline will find you. It will wake you up in the morning. Have you ever been preparing for something and you didn't think you were ready and you couldn't sleep and you wake up in the morning because it's happening? Isn't that interesting? So, when you're going through life and you truly feel like you could do better and you could do more and you truly feel that way, you think about that, I have a hard time sleeping. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. If you lie to yourself and say, you know what, I'm good to go. Like, I'm not worried about this operation. We're good to go. And everything will probably go fine. You sleep all night like a little baby. If you lie to yourself and you're like, I'm in pretty good shape. My family's doing fine. I like this house that I'm in. If that's the lie that you're telling yourself, maybe you can sleep just fine. And maybe it's hard to be disciplined. So what you need to do is you need to tell yourself the truth about what the hell is going on in your life. Do an assessment. Break out a piece of paper and start to write down these things that you claim to be happy about. Pull the stops off. Like, okay, if I could have any house I wanted, is this house the house I wanted? Is it? Is it really? You sure about that? Hey, I'm in pretty good shape right now. You sure about that? If I could snap my fingers in a different physical shape, is this what I would choose? Or would I want to be a little bit better? Would I want to be stronger, faster? Then you gotta ask yourself, you sure about that? Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Discipline is rooted in the truth we tell ourselves. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. So tell yourself the truth about the situation that you're in. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. And it should hurt a little bit. It should hurt a little bit. There should be aspects of your life that you know you can improve upon. That should hurt a little bit. Here's the cool thing. Take ownership of those things and guess what? It doesn't hurt at all. Now guess who's in control? You are.
What do you do on the days when you're just not feeling it?
Akira.
Those days. Those days through the motions. I go through the motions. I don't really want to work out. I work out. I really don't want to hammer on a project. I hammer on the project. Don't really want to get up and get out of bed. I don't want to do it. Yeah, I get up and get out of bed. Those days. Those days. Those days. Those days. Now, these could be signals that you need some time off. And those signals might be right. They could be correct. But don't take today off. Not today. Wait until tomorrow. Don't give in to the immediate gratification that is whispering in your ear. Shut that down. Do not listen to that little voice. Instead, go through the motions. Lift the weights. Sprint the hill. Work on the project. Get out of bed. Lift the weights. Sprint the hill. Work on the project. Get out of bed. Those days. Those days. Those days. Those days. When I'm tired or worn out, I get it done. Those days. Those days. As an overall rule, I do not like procrastination. You need to get things done. But if you are going to rest, that is one thing that you should procrastinate on. That's the one thing I want you to put off until tomorrow. And if, when tomorrow comes, you still feel like you need to rest or you need to take a break, okay, take it. But the chances are you won't. You won't need that rest. Chances are you will realize that the desire to rest was just weakness. It was just the desire to take the path of least resistance, the downhill path, the easy path. And by simply going through the motions, you overcame that path. And you stayed on the righteous path, the disciplined path. You stayed on the war path. Which is right where you know that you belong. Those days. Those days. Those days. Those days. When I'm tired or worn out, I get it done. Those days. Those days. short-term gratification instead of the long-term domination. When I make that error, when I let discipline down, there's only one thing to do. And that's get back on the path. Get back on it. Get back on the path. Get back on it. Get back on the path. Get back on it. Step it up and go harder and push for it. Get back on the path. Get back on it. When laziness creeps in, it's not discipline that opened the door. It's me. It's me rationalizing and explaining and justifying that laziness. When I decide to take the easy path instead of the righteous path of discipline, that is my decision. That's all on me. That's all on me. It's me deciding to cave to my weaknesses and become a slave to them. And when I make that error, when I let discipline down, there's only one thing to do. Get back on it. Get back on the path. Get back on it. Get back on the path. Get back on it. Step it up and go harder and push for it. Get back on the path. Get back on it. For your transgressions, cleanse yourself in the fire and the suffering of the discipline, and get back on the path. The hard, unrelenting path of discipline. That path that leads to freedom. How does good apply to the worst of losses, the death of a loved one? I'm pretty happy. I got a good job. I got a good family. I got a nice house. I'm in pretty good shape. Sometimes I skip work. I'm hero. The scuba training. They would do very traumatic things to you underwater with your scuba gear on, rip it off, rip your face mask off, tie your regulator hoses in knots, just create total mayhem. And eventually they do things that are so horrible to you that you have to come to the surface. And when you came to the surface, what they told you to do immediately was say the words, I feel fine. I feel fine. I feel fine. I feel fine. He said it was some proof that you were neurologically okay. I'm not sure if I believe that. I think what they were really doing was programming us for when there's total mayhem and chaos, we get a chance to get our breath. Instead of freaking out, we just look up and say, I feel fine. Instead of freaking out, we just look up and say, I feel fine. I feel fine. I feel fine. I feel fine.
inject novelty. It's what triggers memory. Because your brain will get bored of the sameness, so you need to trigger memory and attention. Contrast is a way to get people to move from where they are to where you want them to be. You just say, well, it's much less expensive than this. So contrast is one of the most important buttons. Use contrast often. Hey, you don't want to be this bad. You could be over here. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. The more you repeat, the more the wiring gets solidified. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. And if you keep things simple, the brain can process it and deal with it. And if you keep things simple, the brain can process it and deal with it. If it's complicated, your brain has a tendency to just flush it out. Can't deal with it, flush it out. The fake because is a form of pseudo-logic. Sometimes you need to get people moving with a fake reason that doesn't even actually pass logical standards. But people don't need logical reasons. Just look at politics. People have incredibly different opinions, and many of them are smart. So if you've got smart people on opposite sides of basically every issue, you can see that they don't need real reasons. We're not a species that operates on real reasons. We'll take a fake reason, we'll take one we made up, we'll take a guess, we'll follow our friends. Once you understand that people don't need real reasons, it frees you. Because if you're locked in a little world at a lower level of awareness where you say, well, I'm not going to convince somebody unless I have a real reason. Sorry, that's not the reality any of us live in. Real reasons are good if you have them, use them. But we don't need them. Real reasons are good if you have them, use them. But we don't need them. Real reasons are good if you have them, use them. But we don't need them. Once you know you don't need them and the reality can be authored, you're in better shape. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. The more you repeat, the more the wiring gets solidified. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. The more you repeat, the more the wiring gets solidified. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. America's preachers tell me that there is no sermon which is looked forward to with less enthusiasm than a sermon about sin. Well, that's probably true. If we're talking about a secular sermon on the subject of hard work. The pregnant skyline of America was set in place one brick at a time. Now that represents a lot of calluses. America the Beautiful is not an accomplished fact guaranteed to remain intact. God shed his grace on me, to be sure, but this was wasteland when God had it to himself. He handed man a hoe and said, you want another Eden? All right, earn it. And all that's necessary for the weeds to take over again is for you and me to lay down that hoe. Work. 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 Hard work. There is no gospel less popular than the gospel of hard work. 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 Hard work. There is no gospel less popular. Get to work. Get to work. We tell our young people how our country was carved out of the wilderness. No, it wasn't. Our nation was hammered and hoed and chopped and dug, sawed and clawed out of the wilderness by bare-handed men who asked nothing for nothing.
just not feeling it.
It's stuck in a loop.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it is gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it is gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. You've heard of animals chewing off a leg to escape a trap? That's an animal kind of trick. A human would remain in the trap, endure the pain, feigning death that he might kill the trapper and remove a threat to his kind. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? To determine if you're human, be silent. It burns. Silence. His world emptied of everything except the hand immersed in agony. He thought he could feel skin curling black on that agonized hand, the flesh crisping, dropping away until only charred bones remained. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. What's in the box? What's in the box? What's in the box? Pain. Pain. It stopped, as though a switch had been turned off. The pain stopped. Enough. Take your hand from the box, young human, and look at it. Do it. Do it. He jerked his hand from the box, stared at it, astonished. Not a mark. No sign of agony on the flesh. He held up the hand, turned it, flexed the fingers. Pain, she sniffed. A human can override any nerve in the body. Ever since sand through a screen, we've been a Gesserit sift people to find the humans. Paul felt that he had been infected with terrible purpose. He did not know yet what the terrible purpose was. Why do you test for humans? To set you free. To set you free. hopes that this would set them free. 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 That only permitted other men with machines to enslave them. To enslave them. To enslave them. Thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of a human mind.
So mental models are all the rage. Everyone's trying to become smarter by adopting mental models. I think mental models are interesting, but I don't think explicitly in terms of a mental model checklist. That's just not how I think. Instead, I tend to focus on the few lessons that I've learned in life over and over that I think are incredibly important and seem to apply almost universally. One that keeps coming up is the principal agent problem. The principal agent problem. The principal agent problem. A principal is an owner, and an agent is the person who works for the owner. I can summarize this by a famous quote that either Akira. He's got cloak. It's okay. It's okay.
It's just lightning.
It's okay.
It's all good.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. People say, man, you cuss all the fucking time. Why? Well, I hate to say it, the best way for me to get how I feel across, I can't sit here and say, you know what, yeah, I went through the whole weekend, man, it was really hard. No, that motherfucker takes your damn soul, rips it inside out, and then they say, now we're going to fucking start. It allows me to express where I was at a point of my life. If I don't give you all of me, why the hell am I here? How will you learn from me? People take so much offense to me. You will never learn from people if we always tap dance around the truth. We tap dance around the truth by finding the right words so I don't hurt you because you have thin skin. No. Tighten up, people. It's okay. Trust me. It's okay. You might be called one day. It's okay. Trust me. It's okay. It's okay. Trust me. It's okay. You might be called one day. It's okay. Trust me. It's okay. You might be called nigger one day. You might be called some Jewish word or some faggot or gay word. It's okay. Let them call you that. What are you going to do now? They don't own your life. How are you going to control that now? How are you going to flip it upside down and say, Roger that, now I'm going to harness this shit and you'll read about me years from now? How? That's the question. How are you going to do that? Look in your skin. Become more of a human being. Don't be afraid of your reflection in the mirror. Because that's all you can be afraid of. Once you overcome the reflection in the mirror, you've done it. It's okay. Trust me. It's okay. You might be called one day. It's okay. Trust me. It's okay. It's okay. Trust me. It's okay. You might be called one day. It's okay. Trust me. It's okay. It's okay.
Run through your circuit work right now. Happy still so.
Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer who lost a horse. He ran away. And all the neighbors came round that evening and said, "That's too bad." And he said, maybe. The next day, the horse came back and brought 7 wild horses with it. And all the neighbors came around and said, "Why, that's great, isn't it?" And he said, maybe. And he said, maybe. And he said, maybe. And he said, maybe. The next day, his son was attempting to tame one of these horses and was riding it and was thrown and broke his leg. And all the neighbors came round in the evening and said, "Well, that's too bad, isn't it?" The farmer said, maybe. And the next day, the conscription officers came around looking for people for the army. And they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. And all the neighbors came round at the evening and said, "Isn't that wonderful?"
Getting the floor all sweaty.
And he said, maybe. 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 Process of immense complexity. And it is really impossible to tell whether anything that happens in it is good or bad, because you never know what will be the consequences of a misfortune. Or you never know what will be the consequences of good fortune.
I forgot to hit the timer. Man.
I'm pretty happy. I got a good job. I got a good family. I got a nice house. I'm in pretty good shape. Sometimes I skip workouts, and sometimes I sleep in, and sometimes I eat bad. How can I find more discipline? You could be lying to yourself.
What's that?
The scuba training, they would do very traumatic things to you underwater with your scuba gear on, rip it off, rip your face mask off, tie your regulator hoses in knots, just create total mayhem. And eventually they do things that are so horrible to you that you had to come to the surface. And when you came to the surface, what they told you to do immediately was say the words, "I feel fine. I feel fine. I feel fine. I feel fine." He said it was some proof that you were neurologically okay. I'm not sure if I believe that. I think what they were really doing was programming us for when there's total mayhem and chaos, we get a chance to get our breath. Instead of freaking out, we just look up and say, "I feel fine." Instead of freaking out, we just look up and say, "I feel fine. I feel fine. I feel fine.
that you always inject novelty. It's what triggers memory. Because your brain will get bored of the sameness, so you need to trigger memory and attention with contrast. Is a way to get people to move from where they are to where you want them to be. You just say, well, it's much less expensive than this. So contrast is one of the most important buttons. Use contrast often. Hey, you don't want to be this bad. You could be over here. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. The more you repeat, the more the wiring gets solidified. Repetition and simplicity. Our brains are just simple machines. And if you keep things simple, the brain can process it and deal with it. And if you keep things simple, the brain can process it and deal with it.
This is what we did
If it's
today.
complicated, your brain has a tendency to just flush it out.
Take a
Can't deal
screenshot.
with it, flush it out.
And another one.
The fake because is a form of pseudo-logic. Sometimes you need to.
We did the meditation on the Buddha. We did the short Ashtanga yoga, and we did the martial arts workout. So we're done. I'll see you tomorrow, 4:30 a.m.